Your Excellency, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I want to start with a, maybe not quite a simple question, but what does the word leadership mean to you?
Leadership means somebody to have a compass which can tell you which is the north, which is the south, which is the east, which is the west, and lead the people to the right destination. So you must have a target and also a compass, two things.
But and you've championed Pan-Africanism throughout your presidency, but sometimes that has also come at a security threat almost. Specifically, I'm referring to your involvement in places like Somalia and South Sudan, and that places Ugandans at some point at some kind of a risk. Now, how do you reconcile that kind of national backlash for a greater Pan-African ideal?
Oh, Africans have been in a big threat all the time. They were under colonialism. They are marginalized internationally. Their coffee has been being taken without being processed. Like coffee, we get, if you sell a kilo of coffee, before processing it, you get $1 per kilo. When you process it, you get $15 from the same coffee, for which you got $1. If you roast it and grind it, you get $15. So when we export unprocessed coffee, we are losing at least $10 in every kilo. We are losing job opportunities because that processing, the roasting, that is a job level. Grinding, that's a job level. Packaging, that's a job level. We lose all that. So our people are suffering from unemployment, from poverty. Those are bigger problems than a terrorist in Somalia planting a bomb here once in 5 years. Those are the bigger threats. Those are the systemic threats to our people. How many people die from poverty? How many people die from disease? Now, how do I connect disease and poverty with the integration? Because you remember in our first comment was, in order to produce, you need a market. The bigger the market, the easier for you to produce. And when you produce and expand, then you create jobs. So they are all linked.
For both sides as well.
For both sides. They are all linked. So there are more risks in stagnation than in working for integration.
And a theme that has come up quite a few times now already in our discussion is the concept of colonialism. And again, according to one of your biographies, it mentioned that you started the Bush War to combat colonialism. The elections triggered it, but there was a deeper
That's true.
There's a deeper war at hand over colonialism. To what extent has that war been won?
Well, now we make decisions without being influenced by outsiders. Freedom of decision making is one of the gains of our revolution. Okay. That's why we are able to support like ANC. Where ANC was fighting, we supported them. But there are those who didn't want us to support them. But for us, we supported them. And because of that, South Africa is now free. And because South Africa is free, together with others, we are not alone. We were together with other African leaders, but not all. Some, the few who were free to decide. So that freedom of decision making is part of the gain.
But what about the argument now that there's a second liberation needed for Africa, this economic freedom?
But this is part of it, the integration, economic integration, value addition. I was telling you about the coffee being sold without being processed, infrastructure development. It's a package, it's not just one element.
And then to kind of take another angle, if you will, as we mentioned, you've been a leader now as a head of state since 1986. How has the challenge of leadership changed over time? Do you see new challenges emerging, or are they relatively the same ones?
We have identified 10 bottlenecks, strategic bottlenecks. One of them is ideological. What I was telling you at the beginning, what is the purpose of Uganda? What is the value of Uganda? And that one I explained it to you. I said, I need Uganda for my prosperity. Now that's always one of the bottlenecks. When you're not able to define that correctly, then you get into mistakes. Then you have the problem of infrastructure, electricity, roads, the railway. Because if you don't solve those, the cost of production will remain high. Cost of transport will be high, cost of electricity will be high. Now, if those costs are high, that means you can't, the companies cannot manufacture cheaply inside your country because the production costs are high. And that leads to no investment and no employment and so on. So there are other bottlenecks, lack of education. Now, those bottlenecks were identified from the beginning, and we are dealing with them. But one of the bottlenecks was the lack of integration, because you cannot produce sustainably without a market. Those were identified from the beginning, and we have been solving them in batches, sort of a group of them.
And as you look forward into the future, do you see any new challenges emerging?
Of course, there are new challenges from outside. For instance, like ideological chauvinism of some of the groups in the Middle East, like the colonialists trying to reassert themselves. Those are external threats, which also sometimes precipitate internal. So they are there, but our biggest challenge is to deal with the original problems. Yeah.
And in dealing with these challenges, as you know, at the Uongozi Institute, we're doing leadership capacity building. What advice would you give to aspiring leaders or to the leaders of the future about the approach to tackling, the current issues that still plague the continent and their countries, but also the ones that are coming ahead?
Remember that you are a social doctor. You are here to know the sickness of this patient called Ugandan society. What is their sickness? Or what are their sicknesses? If you don't do that, then you will have no purpose and you will fail.
So identify the issues and diagnose it, and then provide the appropriate solution.
Yes.
Okay. And we're coming to the end of the program, really unfortunately, but is there any other sort of advice or anything else you would like to say, both to our audience but also to your fellow leaders across Africa?
No. It's just because Africa, because it is, as I've told you, it is historically pre-capitalist, pre-feudal. You find that the problems are roughly the same, or with some local variations. So it's important that we harmonize on understanding of these bottlenecks. It will make work much easier. It will, for instance, influence budgeting. Because you can find in African countries, like here in Uganda, you find people demanding higher salaries. Oh, you want higher salaries, but you have not dealt with the infrastructure, with the roads, with the electricity. How will you attract investments if the electricity prices are high, or if the electricity is not there, but you have got high wages for the civil servants? How will the economy grow? So this sharing of, like the medical fraternity, they also compare. If you have diagnosed Ebola here, then you share it with others. How did you identify Ebola? How did you identify malaria? Yeah. That's what I would like to mention, because a lot of time is wasted. Some of these stimuli are universally applicable. Like the Europeans, they wasted almost 300 years failing to define the way forward. There were people called bullionists. These were people in Portugal and Spain and so on, who believed that if the Europeans go to South America and kill all the Red Indians and steal gold and silver, it would make their countries rich, because they thought richness was gold, that if you had gold that you are rich. Now, Portugal and Spain excelled in that, in killing the Red Indians in South America. But they ended up being the most backward countries of Europe. Then you had another group in France. Those were called physiocrats. Now, the physiocrats believed that agriculture was the source of all value. But that's not correct. If you have got only agriculture, you will not move. And agriculture itself is not sustainable without industry. The two must interact. The Europeans couldn't move until this man Adam Smith came along and said, no, what you need to do is to specialize, have a division of labor, and you exchange. Cooperative advantage. If somebody is good at something, then he produces it and then sells to somebody else. So that's how the Europeans were able to move. You find a country like Holland, which did not have gold, which did not have silver. It became a developed country. Even today, it's more developed than Spain or Portugal. Although Spain is a very big country with a big population, with a long history, but because the diagnosis was not correct.
Okay. Yeah.
They lagged behind. In Asia, you can see countries like Burma. Burma is a very rich country in terms of natural resources, in terms of agriculture, in terms of forests, minerals. I think they even have oil. I think they even have petroleum in Burma. But it's now far, far backward compared to South Korea. South Korea is a very tiny country with no resources, but because of the diagnosis. a correct diagnosis by Pak Chung-hee, one of their leaders. Korea now is one of the richest countries in the world. Burma, bigger in land area, richer in natural resources, but very far behind Korea.
Okay. And in terms of the influences, are there any leaders, past or present, that have inspired you as a leader?
Oh yes, many. One of them, Mwalimu was one of them. Mwalimu managed the situation in Tanzania very well. He was against sectarianism. That's how he was able to unite Tanganyika, which had a number of groups, tribes, religions, but they didn't have the same problems like they have been having in other countries. When we say Tanzania has been united, it is not because they didn't have tribes, because they have tribes, many tribes, and they have also religious groups. But Mwalimu was able to show them a common purpose, which was uniting them. And then he was also a Pan-Africanist, knowing that to serve the interests of the people well, you must be both a nationalist and a Pan-Africanist.
And I want to come back to this question of Pan-Africanism a little bit later, but if you'll indulge me, I just want to ask a few more questions just on leadership. Do you feel that there are specific challenges to leading in Africa that is different from the rest of the world? Or is leadership something that is a challenge that's universal?
Oh, no. There are definitely big differences. For one thing, the African societies are pre-capitalist. They are pre-capitalist. Many of them are even pre-feudal. Many of them are before the use of money. The concept of profit is not very, very clear to them. They are still communal societies. Some are feudal, while the European society has been capitalist for the last 300 or so years. So definitely the challenges are totally different. And in terms of managing the government, the difference is that in Africa we are building nations, while in Europe and America they are running nations. Sure. Running is different from building.
Yeah, for sure. And also then, as a leader, what has been your vision, not just for Uganda, but for Africa?
Well, the vision, I start with the individual. This individual person. What does he need to ensure him prosperity, to be prosperous, and to be secure? These are the two words, prosperity and security.
Thank you very much for joining us on the program, and hopefully we can have you again soon.
Thank you.